the ads and demonstrations are in line with this. And it's not that PETA has this feminist framework and then the ads undermine it but are effective, but that is actually consistent with it. First, what I want to talk about is why PETA is called sexist, so that I can rebut these and then work on my positive view of sex work and PETA. So one thing I really focused on, because I think that it really summarizes the PETA sexist arguments, when, by the way, people are making arguments. I think that it is very commonplace for people to think about this image of Pamela Anderson, to say PETA is sexist, to have a notion that PETA is sexist, and to not be going any further, which, as I said, I think delegitimizes and is troubling to the people that are involved with it, and that at the very least we have some kind of responsibility or a good idea to, before just saying PETA's sexist, to look into it and talk about it. But so, one book is Emily Gardner's Women and the Animal Rights Movement, which came out about 2 years ago. She has an entire chapter on using sexism to sell animal rights. And in this paper, she says that she's trying to understand gender tensions in the animal rights movement. So what she did was she requested images from PETA advertisements that featured only women and showed them to activists who were not involved with PETA. And this is the exact kind of research that I'd like to caution us all against using by first saying that she didn't want advertisements with men in it to even be researched, and that none of the animal activists she talked to are involved in the planning or being in any of these advertisements or demonstrations. So she ends up with 5 reasons why PETA is sexist. And I think it's representative of the more general feminist literature on why PETA is sexist. Because PETA's tactics are demeaning to women. Secondly, that these advertisements personally insulted the women activists who were interviewed, that these ads and demonstrations are not consistent with fighting objectification, that they're not effective, and that they damage the animal rights movement more generally. Also specifically egregious to many people interviewed about how they felt about these ads, or that they only showed a certain type of woman who is blonde with big breasts, which from some unexplained logic undermines the work of feminists to stop the abuse of women. The interviewees felt that PETA was inconsistent, capitalizing on the oppression of women in a patriarchal society in order to stop the oppression of women, be it human women or non-human women. Some discussed PETA's demonstrations and that the activists were volunteers, interpreting these women as, and putting themselves in vulnerable positions to be recipients of staring, pointing, and commentaries about their bodies. Most people interviewed in this book assumed that the people who saw these ads and demonstrations would not see any of the messages behind the images. For example, one interviewee remarked, "Do they really think they're going to get a bunch of jocks to go vegan just by showing a naked woman?" So even in analyzing the views of women who either supported or mixed in their support of sexualized tactics, and in this book, 44% of the women interviewed opposed the ads, and the other were either in support or neutral about them. But so even when we're talking about people who don't oppose these ads, Gardner says that the tactics seem to be justified for people who like it because they're successful, because women consent to be in them, or because oppressing women is not as bad as the more severe oppression animals face. In this section, Gardner goes out of her way to point that the one woman who actively said she was in favor of PETA's tactics, because they are really great and very cute, notes herself that she has never pretended to be a feminist. Another interviewee stated, questioned whether the ads contributed to further suffering, such as rape or other forms of violence against women. Similarly, Gardner notes that feminists who support PETA's tactics can generally understand why others are so vehemently objective to it. I think representative of Gardner's presentation of feminists in favor of PETA is her quote of one activist, Lola, who states that, "As much as I don't want to see scantily clad women, some of the ads make a difference, as much as I hate it. It's not that I don't see the contradiction." For Gardner then, in the thrust of the chapter, and for people who talk about this, it's that PETA and animal activists who support PETA just don't understand the link between the subjection of women and animals, and that, quoting her, "People in the movement seemed uninformed about the context of oppression with regard to women, sexuality, and economics." And this is what I find really problematic, because I, and the people I interviewed, and the people I just talked with as friends, are involved with PETA, are involved with these ads, and I don't think that I'm uninformed about the context of oppression of women's sexuality and economics. So moving to talking to the people who do these ads and demonstrations, and this is me at one of the anti-fur demonstrations I was talking about. So you'll see as we paint this side here, and then these are different ways that these got interpreted by news media. This is widely covered in India. You can see other stories and what's going on. That I do think that you see talking and feeling empowered, and that this is effective, but I also see from myself and from people I talk to that being naked in public with PETA can be part of feminist goals of breaking down binaries and showing the constructed nature and showing how power is part of forming this and interconnectedness of oppression, and also violating gender norms and conventions, especially in demonstrations, because I think that being naked in public is a surprising thing. If it wasn't surprising to be naked in public, then PETA wouldn't get all of this reactions from the ads, and that it can be a transgressive act to purposefully be naked in public. I have a lot more arguments about this too, and I have so much from so many people I've interviewed. If you want to hear particular ways people felt empowered or how they felt like this worked to breaking down binaries with them, that I would love to talk about. And it comes down to also, and this is where I want to move to sex work and where I'm going to conclude, that I personally haven't felt sexualized during these demonstrations. I feel like people stopped and they asked what was going on and were curious, and I actually got to talk to people about animal issues instead of them just like rolling their eyes at me or walking past or refusing to get a leaflet. But that I feel more sexualized when I walk down the street in a short skirt and I'm just trying to walk and like get on the subway and people are like calling me mommy and saying God bless you, than I did purposely choosing to stand without my clothing on in public for PETA. But maybe I was sexualized. Maybe people who were looking at me saw me as a sexual object. But for me, that is not necessarily out of line with feminism. And I just want to talk about pro-sex feminism and where I see this debate and where I see this going. And like I said, I'm really influenced by Linda McElroy, and there's two things that she talks about with sexualization and objectification, and there's not time now to talk about all of pro-sex feminism. But one is that we should problematize sexualization as always being a bad thing. And she questions if there is something always wrong as seeing a woman or a man or a person who doesn't identify with a gender as their body. We see people as their brains. We are embodied. We do have bodies. Whether you want to argue that naturally or constructively we're sexual beings, we should problematize that always being seen as part of your body is a bad thing. And she also problematizes objectification, saying that it doesn't make sense because objects aren't sexual. So when you say that someone's reduced to a sex object, you're kind of involved in this like fake, inflaming argument that doesn't really work out. And then if you're a sexual object as a person, it's something different than being an object, which isn't sexual. And she also talks about a right to define for yourself what's degrading, because these are also said to be degrading, and that there's a role for people involved in this to talk about it. And I think that's most of what I want to say, and great. That I think this is really, really important because PETA is a giant organization. These ads and demonstrations are happening. Millions of people are seeing them, and lots of people are involved with them. And I don't want to be legitimizing the experiences of people involved with them. So I hope we can have this conversation, and maybe we'll still conclude that PETA is sexist, but I want to have the conversation. Thank you.